I want to start off by introducing our panel. First off, my name is Ray Panatton. I'm the incoming Director of Marketing Communications for the ABA YLD. I'm the managing partner at the Ted Smith Law Group, a boutique litigation practice in the heart of Central Texas. In addition to my work as the membership and marketing director, I've also served as a past chair of the TIPS Medicine and Law Committee, and I'm the president-elect of the Bell County Young Lawyers Association. Next is Brian Findley. He is the founder of Findley Law, where he is a plaintiff's personal injury and medical malpractice attorney in San Diego, California. Brian is known for a history of extraordinary injury case results and his service to the community. Brian serves as the president-elect of Consumer Attorneys of San Diego, as chair of the Medicine and Law Committee of the TIPS section, and as an executive member of the American Association for Justice's Professional Negligence section. Next is Aaron Sohaski. Aaron is the Director of Contracting and Compliance for the Henry Ford Physician Network in ACO. There, he engages in drafting, structuring, and negotiating value-based payer relations, leads corporate governance structures, and ensures providers adhere to regulatory and compliance activities through routine audits, education sessions, and investigations. Aaron is a Detroit Economic Club Young Leader board member, Teach for America alumni board member, and currently holds multiple bar leadership positions. While in law school, Aaron chaired the ABA Law Student Division. Aaron received his BA from Grand Valley State University, MS from the Johns Hopkins University, and a JD from WMU Cooley Law School. Jerome Crawford, Jerome Crawford is a unique hybrid role as the Director of Legal Operations and Social Equity for Pleasantrees, a Michigan premier cultivator and seller of high-quality Midwest cannabis. There, he is responsible for the gamut of legal needs and spearheads social equity initiatives to ensure the company makes positive, genuine, and lasting impact within local communities as it grows. A native Detroiter and super Spartan, Crawford graduated magna cum laude from pre-law at Michigan State University before earning his Juris Doctor at the MSU College of Law. On a national level, he most recently served as co-chair of the Men of Color Project, an initiative of the American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division that aims to address the lack of diversity and advancement of men of color in the legal profession. Outside of breaking ground as the first Black in-house counsel of a major cannabis manufacturer in the state of Michigan, Crawford is a working actor, model, and comedian, and esteemed member of the Phi Beta Sigma Incorporated fraternity. And lastly, we have Cali Franks. Cali is a program attorney with Lawline, where she spends her days speaking with passionate attorneys and learning from the best and the brightest in the legal profession. A native Texan, Cali earned her BA in government from the University of Texas in Austin in 2015. After graduating from St. Mary's University School of Law and getting her Texas law license in 2018, Cali practiced civil litigation and insurance defense in Dallas, Texas for 3 years. Cali is an active in her community and bar service, serving on numerous boards and holding various elected positions. Cali was recently recognized as the American Bar Association Top 40 Young Lawyers for 2022. When not working, Cali likes to travel with her fiance and plays with her 2 small rescue dogs, Bailey and Murphy. Thank you all to the panel for joining us today. This webinar is going to focus on a frank and honest discussion of how to effectively utilize the time between taking the bar exam and becoming licensed. This professional no man's land can often be difficult to navigate and be extremely overwhelming. As you can see and as you have heard, our panelists today have a diverse and varied background, as well as a diverse and varied legal experience getting to the point where they're at in their careers. We're hoping that this background will help shed some light on how you can effectively utilize this time from both traditional and non-traditional career pathways. So first, Jerome, to you, why do you think this topic's so important?
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate you all joining us. And Ray, thanks for that question and teeing us up to get right into it. The reason I think that question is so important because, surprise, surprise, we as lawyers really like this thing called control. And we like to be in control of everything. And the irony of this time frame is that it's a time frame where you probably lack the most control, right, over what's happening in your future. What you did on the bar exam already happened, right? It occurred. Like I always say, you already passed. It's done. You did your part. Now the next phase, it's doing its part. So candidly, and it's difficult, right, is you can't continue to produce any change results from your anxiety, from your worry, anything like that. The best thing you can do is to frankly build into yourself for what's coming next, right? And as a person that practices eternal optimism, for those that know me, and I always have a silver lining and always is a reason why for everything. It's important that you use this time to your advantage. The adage I'll share with you all, for those who may have heard of it, is about the circle of influence and the circle of control. Some people may have heard this before, some people may have not, but basically imagine two circles. One is a very tiny circle, and around that circle is a gigantic circle, it's a huge circle. That huge circle represents a circle of influence, all the things in your life that influence you, impact you in some way, right? Such as, the bar results and how they're going to outcome, and what if I pass, or what if I don't, or what if this, and what if that, and the rabbit hole you send your brain down, or at best, the things that you can influence in life. Circle of control is that tiny circle in the middle. And all that represents is what you can actually do about any of it. And frankly, the reason it's that small is because it's you. You only have the ability to control you. You can't control any other circumstances. And as much as we even try, whether it be kids, whether it be spouses, family members, we still can't control this. We can't even control our own dogs. So if we can't control pets and the like, then you certainly can't control those circumstances around you. So I like to always lead with that. There's something important to kind of make us realize that all that energy we may spend is really sort of wasted effort. And so the best thing you can do in this time, this bridge, this gap period, not like a gap year, but so this gap period you can use to your advantage to really find an opportunity to establish some peace. Because frankly, there are very few times in your life where you get to maybe turn one email address off before you turn on another one. And all of us as lawyers in the room, if ever transition to job, you love that time frame, right? Take that 2 weeks, take that whatever you can do. So I definitely implore you to use that to your advantage.
Well, I appreciate you setting us up for today's conversation, and I want it to be just that, a conversation. So for those of watching the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A function throughout the session. We will be taking those questions. So please feel free to utilize that as we get going. So this one's going to be to all of our panelists today, and I'll start with you, Cali. What did you do between the bar exam and getting licensed?
Yeah, so it feels like 100 years ago and also yesterday that I was in this same position that you are all here watching. It's a weird time. It's a weird transition. I did not have a job offer after law school. I did not have a job offer while studying for the bar. I did not have a job offer after taking the bar. And so it's this weird, I went to a doctorate school. I have a license. I almost have a license. But no one knows my worth, value yet. In the job world. So for those of you who have careers waiting for you on the other side of your license, that's amazing. For those of you who don't, it's okay. I took a lot of time to just figure out where I wanted to go in life and where I wanted to be. As Jerome said, there's not many times in life as an adult where you get to kind of figure out what the next step is without having a lot of pressure on you. So while waiting for those months, I took some time to just reflect on if I wanted to stay in San Antonio, if I wanted to come back home to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. What did those legal markets look like? What did I actually want to do with my career? And then I took a lot of time for just like well-being. I wish I had known now what I would have known back then, which is take more time for well-being, because you don't get any hardly when you're an attorney. So it's an interesting time. People don't seem to understand what you're necessarily going through, and that's okay. But it's a fun time to kind of reflect on the journey that you've been on to get you through law school.
Can you remind us, when did you sit for the bar?
November of 2018.
So you're not too terribly far removed from this stage of your career.
Yeah, it's weird and interesting. The first go around of someone taking a bar that's not you kind of snap back into that panic mode. And then you see for the next, 20 years, everyone who passed the bar, congratulating them, and you're not knowing that that was, what it's like to wait for that email or to wait for that notice. So you get to commiserate for the rest of your life.
Now, Brian, you're kind of on the opposite end of our spectrum here. When did you sit for the bar, and how did you effectively use that time between graduation or taking the bar and licensure?
Yeah, so I sat for the bar in the summer of 2007. So only 11 and a half years or so before Cali did. But what I knew what I wanted to do in law school. I kind of figured out that I liked litigation and that I wanted to do that. So, I was already kind of clerking for people, and I went to a smaller law school and a smaller legal community. In here, San Diego is a big city, but the legal community is actually quite small compared to somewhere like Los Angeles, or even really, I felt like Atlanta, where I came from, where I went to undergrad. So I was kind of hustling. I didn't know anybody in California, really. I didn't have any networking connections. So in law school, I was kind of hustling and just trying to get some experience, get to know lawyers and clerk. And so that period of time during, I guess, taking the bar and then getting results, I was just going back to a clerking job where I was just being, insanely underpaid and abused. And, I worked for great people, but of course, just, exploited for my Westlaw password and all of that, right? And I went back to that, and there was kind of a loose promise of, if you pass the bar, maybe we'll up your pay by $250 an hour or something like that, but it kind of ticked off box one on my list, which is, I've got to work, I've got to pay the bills. I don't have anybody else supporting me, and I want to be working in this industry, in litigation. And so I took time off as well, especially the day that bar results came out. I probably didn't take a lot of time off, because I remember taking off that day specifically and just going surfing and drinking beers on the beach, just completely alone. I could not handle anyone. But after that happened, it all kind of fell into place that I went back to that job. They did up my pay by maybe $250 an hour for a few months. But because I had that job, then I was able to start sending out resumes, kind of work my way up the litigation ladder to a bigger firm, and then a bigger firm. And then finally, long story short, get to the place where I am now, which is I have my own firm. I didn't even know that's what I wanted back then. But, I feel like I'm at the other end of the rainbow now, looking back at all of that stuff and saying, okay, I think that I did the right thing. It felt like paying dues at the time, and I didn't really know where it was going to end up. But now I wake up and I don't really surf anymore, but I'm a big mountain biker, and, ride my bike every morning as long as I don't have a morning deposition. And I put in all the work to get the case referrals and the business that I need to support that lifestyle without grinding out the 80-hour week at a bigger firm or something like that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Jerome, what about you? When did you sit for the bar, and how did you use that time?
I just first want to extend my very public thanks to Brian for not letting me feel like the elder statesman here. Thank you, my friend. I sat for the bar in 2012. So what feels like sometimes an eternity to me, I can't say out loud, because then it's just going to give Brian a few more gray hairs than we already have developing. I know this is where they get you, man, the side of the beer. Summer of 2012 was for me. That's when I actually sat for the bar. I did have, and I didn't share this at the beginning, the outset of my own personal journey. I had my job already. So I'd gone through, I was fortunate to get a position through OCI's the year prior, got offered that role. So I got to, frankly, I'll say the luxury and the blessing to be able to live through my 3-0 year of knowing where I was going, right? For better or worse. And so knowing where I was going, and I was going to sort of big law, Dickinson Wright, and in stepping into that firm, I had I recall about a month or so gap of time from the bar is over, and this is when you're going to officially start, right? The challenge, I think, is that for many of those folks that you step into a role, your anxiety has a chance to increase when you step into the job, because then you're wondering, well, what happens if I don't pass? I'm already here. And they said, yeah, you're good, but send us those results when you get them, right? And here's the irony of what happened my year. And I share this with you because, again, about the fact you can't do anything about it, right? And this always behooves you to just control what you can. My year in Michigan, that bar year, was the infamous year that we had about a 30% drop in passage rate. And it was nobody's fault, but frankly, the Board of Law Examiners. There was huge disputes between the law schools and the state. The rate dropped from like 85% to I think like 54%. The folks that you knew were getting the jurisprudence and the book awards were the ones that didn't pass. And the reason why, the state changed the rubric and didn't tell anybody. So if you change the rules and you move the goalpost, people are going to be upset about it. And so that was also the first year we ever had online examinations. And that was also by lottery, right? So I won a lucky lotto ticket. I was having a good year, so I should have played the Mega Millions. But the point is that I was in the zone where, again, there was a lot of anxiety. And then even when the results dropped, They used to put names out there, not ID numbers, just a lot of screw ups, frankly, the state had at that time, that had to then later be rectified. So I was thankful in some respects. I didn't worry because it was like, there's nothing I can do about it. But that anxiety definitely had a chance to creep in once I started showing up for work. And now I'm billing hours, but you can't put attorney in your signature block because you're not one yet, right? And so, when I spent that time, that month though, let's focus on that. I think before I started working was what I said. I spent time with family. I took a couple of trips, right? Some family vacations, spent as much time I could not thinking about work, right? I knew it was coming down the pipe. And I spent as much time as I possibly could with just my loved ones and just kind of enjoying the day to day.
Aaron, what about you? When did you sit for the bar and how did you utilize that time?
I think I'm somewhere. I'm not the eldest. I'm not the youngest. I'm kind of in a tweener here. So I sat for the bar exam in January or February bar taker of 2016. And so I was kind of one of those weird winter bar takers. I graduated in January, which actually worked out pretty well because Michigan in the winter, there's nothing much better to do than study. So that was fantastic. It was an awful winter that year. So that was actually, the study kind of just flew by because there was nothing really to do outside anyway, unless you wanted to go skiing or sledding, and really had no desire to do either of those at the time. For me, I was working full time throughout law school and throughout my bar prep period. So I took off very little time. I actually only took off the Monday, Tuesday of the week of the bar exam, and then the bar exam was Wednesday, Thursday, and I was actually back in the office on Friday because I had such limited PTO time at that time, especially since it was the beginning of the calendar year and it was on a rolling basis. So not a lot of PTO that was available to me. So kind of just had to suck it up, which was okay. Everybody comes at it from a different perspective, and like Brian, I had to pay the mortgage, keep the lights on, and so you do what you can, right? But it actually worked out pretty well for me because immediately after the bar exam, I went back into the routine that I had been used to all throughout law school and even prior to starting law school. So it just kind of felt like, day after day was all the same, and it really kind of allowed me to not focus on awaiting when those test results would come in. But I think, to Brian's point, it also allowed the luxury of being able to be selective in what you wanted to do with your career next. So even when I passed the bar exam, I still had the opportunity to vet several different offers and opportunities, and I actually had the time to be able to do it and really weigh and calculate my decisions before, just saying, okay, I got an offer, I'm going to take it immediately because I don't know when I'm going to get another one. So that, having that income behind you was certainly advantageous to be able to be selective. And, I ended up at a place where I really wanted to be. It aligns with my mission and values. And, it takes my passion for caring for others, along with my, intellect and knowledge that I've attained through law school and my other prior studies all into account. So I'm very blessed to be able to use all of my disciplines on a day-to-day basis in the role that I have. But it was because I had the opportunity to work throughout and then also work post up until receiving results that made it all worthwhile. And honestly, I worked at a place that was very supportive, and everybody knew as soon as I would pass the bar exam, I was moving on to a different opportunity. So, but everybody was super supportive of that, and that, I had a really good culture that I was a part of. So that even made it better, because I felt supported by the people I was working alongside. I didn't have to hide the fact that I was going to be leaving. I actually think what was more challenging throughout this was, for myself, I'm first generation undergrad, college, law school, all the gamut there of any post high school education in my family. And for me, my family had no idea what it was like to wait the 6 to 8 weeks for the results of a test, right? Like, what do you mean you have to wait 2 months for a test? Like when they were in grade school, high school, it was next day, the results of how you did. And so they were like, "What, are you an attorney or are you not?" I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know how I did on that test. I think I did okay, but some people say that might be a bad thing if you think you did okay. And so that's like that self-talk you have to yourself. But for my family, they didn't understand like why the runway was so long. And And that kind of led a bit to the anxiety. So it got to the point of, I will know probably by May, please don't ask me until then. And so being very transparent with folks about what the expectations, about what you want in between the time you've taken the bar and when you learn your results. I think that is very personal to everybody, and what level of support you need from your family and friends. I think it's okay to be able to, to tell them how you want to go about it. They'll be understanding. I think for me, I didn't have that upfront conversation. And so it weighed on me and brought me more anxiety because they keep on asking. So I think if I would have had that upfront conversation, I would have probably had a lot less anxiety about waiting for those results. But
so another source of anxiety for a lot of folks is the job search, how to find jobs, how to get jobs, how to make yourself appealing to the hiring committee or the hiring partner, whatever the case may be. And Brian, I know you came out of law school or came out of undergrad right around the time of the 2008, we'll call it a recession, the Great Recession, as it were. And that posed some interesting challenges that I think our new law students or new law graduates are also facing. How did you go about looking for a job when it came to that period, both in law school and after law school?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, to the Great Recession, that was tough for everybody that came out right around when I came out, and really the people that came out maybe in the next class or the next mid-year class. So I graduated summer of 2007, took the bar. I knew my results by like Thanksgiving of 2007. There was rumblings then, right? But the bottom really fell out of the stock market, and they stopped building houses and everything, which was important to me because I was working at a construction defect defense firm. So if they weren't building houses, they weren't getting sued for building houses, and we didn't have any work. The bottom really fell out in maybe like mid to October-ish 2008. At least that's what it felt like to me. So I was lucky in that I had put in the legwork to kind of trade up to get that job at kind of a mid-sized construction defect and class action firm at that time. But I'll tell you, and I'm not going to name any names, but I'll tell you that I figured out relatively quickly that I didn't really want to be there. I didn't want to be there for long. It was a rung on the ladder for me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't somewhere, I kind of realized like my litmus test doing that with litigation law firms was to look up at the partners and get to know the partners and say to myself, if they want me to be their partner one day, do I want that, like for my life long term? And I realized relatively, within 6 months or so that the answer was no at that firm. But I was stuck there for, at least a couple of years before I could find other good employment because nobody was hiring and people were getting fired, even at my firm. So, I was in a situation, and maybe some people find themselves in that kind of situation now. And I just found that the best way out for me was to keep my nose down and work on my skills. And I said, well, what can I do next? I'd been working on researching and writing a lot, but at that point, I'd been in law school. I'd been out of law school for, a year and a half or so. I said, well, the next skill that's going to make me a good litigator and, get that next job is going to be being able to question witnesses, take depositions, defend depositions, maybe even get some expert depositions under my belt. And so, I just stalked the office in every case possible to try, do you really want to take that deposition? Let me jump in there, with you, or let me sit in with the partner or something like that. And I really found that was the way to handle it, because that, I think, helped tip me over the edge once it was time that the market had recovered. I had been working on my skills, and I could say, hey, I've taken, over 100 depositions now in my career as like a third or fourth year lawyer. And, I'm going to be able to hit the ground running immediately when I come here.
So Cali, you testified, I'm sorry, you spoke earlier to the fact that you, sorry, I'm a trial lawyer, bad habits. So you spoke earlier that when you were in law school and you graduated, you didn't have a job lined up, but ultimately you were hired at a civil defense firm. What are some concrete steps that you took to get you to that point?
Yeah, hopefully we're not under oath at this moment. But that is a funny comment. So like I said, I didn't have a job. And I was in a position, thankfully, where, I had support with bills and keeping the lights on and things like that. So I had the ability to kind of take that time to reflect. And I didn't take another job, but I do remember feeling very, I don't want to say inadequate, but just unsure of footing of what to do during that time. Do I apply? Do I, wait until I get the bar results? And so what I ultimately ended up doing was I applied, and I said, pending results. I think I got that from my career services area. And I think what's important to understand is, as attorneys, we think that you graduate law school and you should have it all together. And we know that as attorneys and taking for the bar that we didn't have it all together, but for some reason we think that every partner that interviews us thinks we have it all together. And they know what they're getting when they hire someone that just took the bar or that is waiting for the bar. So if someone is interviewing you during this period, if someone is reaching out, asking for someone to be hired during that period of time that is waiting for the bar, sometimes they'll say, pending bar results is okay for you to apply for this. They know what they're getting. So you don't have to be anything more than what you are. You don't have to, go in there thinking, I haven't taken any depositions, I don't know if I'm going to pass the bar. They know that. And what is important in that time frame of life is to know that no one else has it all figured out. No attorney walked in after law school and began taking depositions and making billions of dollars. And that's really hard when we are faced with a career and in a community where that presence is so well known and is so valued. So the advice that I can give someone that's looking for a job during this time is to keep looking, find a place, use this time to figure out what you want. As Aaron said, he had the ability to kind of gauge where he wanted. He didn't have to take the first offer. I did. And so it's a very valuable time, and you can really reflect on what is best for you, but keeping in mind that they know what they're getting when you say you're a new attorney, you're waiting for the bar. Don't let that deter you. And maybe you'll get hey, let me know when you pass and we can wrap back around to this. And that's fantastic. Could have a foot in the door, but don't let that discourage you.
And I will say, as the managing partner of my law firm, when we hire new grads, we absolutely know, and the expectations are there. So that's a good point, Callie. Jerome, in that same vein, and I'll admit, I have a t-shirt in my closet says I'm a J. Crawford fan, so I want to be Jerome when I grow up. You are somebody who has taken their personal passions and has turned that into a career while maintaining a legal position. Speak a little bit about what that path looked like for you to get from, new graduate to newly licensed to someone who embraced their passion and is just taking that ball and running with it.
Oh, I'm humbled and flattered, and Ray, I'm glad to hear that the check cashed, man. So good. I still have the address right. Jokes aside, to Ray's point, I made my passion right into a career, and that is now a legal drug dealer. Jokes also, again, aside, I work in the legalized cannabis industry, and to his point, to really emphasize what he's getting at, of course, what he knows is that a passion of mine is DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Candidly, I never was even a consumer of our own products in any way in my life. Not for any reason, just was not my thing growing up. Friends do it, hey, knock yourself out, bro, boom, do your thing. For me, what pulled me in initially was the history of my industry, and the fact that it is frankly sorted before it was an industry. The war on drugs is not equally applied. It was, as we know, applied specifically against communities of color and impoverished communities unequally. And so it's just not a secret, it's on record. And so I think to be part of the change we want to see as this becomes a legalized space and is happening state by state, and frankly, I'm very fortunate to be a pioneer in that and to be a representative in it. And so it's something that I tout boldly, but humbly, in a sense that if it's about having a seat at the table is great, but what do I do to open up doors for other people? So the way I'd say I've been able to maintain that is really just always trying to stay very mission focused. Now that's hard, right? I mean, as my friends here just shared with everybody, when your initial motivations may be financial, right? It may be aspirational. How do I get from this phase of my career to next? And I've been fortunate to live all of them. I did big law firm. I've been in-house counsel now in 3 different industries in the official sense. I've been seconded twice, right, in my career. So I've seen all the inner workings, and even have the chance to be an adjunct law professor today. So I know all these different structures. The goal is when you're maneuvering, And when you're navigating, still trying to keep your core principles and core values, just that Aaron shared that earlier about being somewhere that he loves what he does. And I can say that definitely my role I've been in now coming up on 2 years, and actually in a bit of news to share here in a moment for you all, is that I'm actually ascending to the chief legal officer role effective yesterday. So that is outstanding, and I'm very grateful for that. But a lot of that is again keeping those missions and values really at the core focused. Now, Dickinson, right? Did it feel that way when I was billing 2,000 hours a year? Maybe not. Right. And I always feel that way. But how was I getting it off? How was I getting it done? Well, I was more extracurricular involved in whether it been obviously ABA, Young Lawyers Division work. At my local chapter, actually, where Aaron and I met many years ago, was been our State Bar Michigan Young Lawyers section, right? I remember when he took that fabled February bar, right? And was also still doing what he was doing, the good work, even at that time when he was awaiting licensure and whatnot. So, I think it's about finding ways to still do what you want to do. And I've been fortunate to now be able to mold that into my day job to where now I've scaled back a ton of my involvements because frankly, I do it every day. Right. I have unique ways where, tomorrow I'm meeting with a local judge and some other members of legal aid because we're talking about an exposure event we're putting together. And that's through my role sort of at the company, because again, that's a part of a mission of how we try to be that change you want to see under what we call social equity in the cannabis industry, but same thing of diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's how I've been able to really live the passion. Is to frankly not forget it, keep it at the forefront. I shared this with my students when we wrapped up the summer class last week, that it's frankly easier for you all to do that now. The reason we impart on you is because they say a wise person learns from their own mistakes, a wiser person learns from the mistakes of others. We want you to be able to see our missteps, and we want to see you, hey, avoid that pitfall. You don't have to go through that. And if I could do it all over again, instead of being a 7-year plan, I get it done in 2 or 3. Right. And here's how, because I'd be more intentional. So when we impart that on y'all, it's because we want to see y'all win. Right. Like I live for the wins of the people. That gives me joy. That gives me excitement. And if there's a chance that we can help, you all kind of divert some of those pitfalls and have a smoother journey, for sure. And I think that starts with remembering what your purpose is, what you're passionate about, and how you actually go out there and make it a reality.
Hey, Ray, can I jump in for a second and just mention, it just occurs to me what either a great panel or what a terrible panel you've put together on this subject, because everybody has such a different path, like especially in this period that we're talking about, right? In between kind of bar results and taking the bar, and just as a young person kind of starting out in this career. And it really is interesting to me. And I think if there's one kind of thing that you can take from it, because we're all just giving kind of different advice or what may have worked for us, is I think you really have to think about what your goal is. Jerome's goal and Cali's goal was different than my goal. It's probably was different than yours, Ray, and different than Aaron's. And it doesn't have to be like, I didn't know I wanted to own my own firm back when I was in law school or just taking the bar. That would have terrified me. I wanted to get a job for the biggest, most securest firm that I possibly could. But it doesn't have to be the ultimate goal that you're going to have when you're a middle-aged man with gray in his beard. It's whatever your goal is, you already know what it is at this point. It doesn't have to be the ultimate goal. You know where you're aiming at, and you need to think about what are the steps that are really going to get you to the next level of doing what you want to do.
So Brian, I do want to stay with you because you said that you went to a law school in a different state than where you're ultimately practicing. So at some point there was this decision-making time for you. Okay, do I stay here? Do I go? I'm sure you had a network where your law school was, and you kind of abandoned that, for lack of a better phrase. There's obviously some anxiety that goes with that, especially when you're awaiting bar results and you don't know if you're going to be licensed or not. How did you deal with that anxiety?
Yeah, I probably felt it, maybe a little earlier than some people do, because I knew when I made that decision to, move about as far away from, Athens, Georgia, as I could to the other side of the country, I knew that was going to be an issue just already. My dad didn't live here. Nobody in my family lives here. I did have a brother up in LA in the entertainment industry, but there was, I wasn't going to be an entertainment lawyer in LA. At least, first year of law school kind of disabused me of that, like it did most people. So, I think I felt it a little earlier, and that's why I did clerking a little bit earlier. And this maybe doesn't answer your question, but this occurs to me because I'm talking about, the importance of having that job, and I think Aaron's with me on this, is that, we're really trying to set up something and work hard, nose to the grindstone, kind of during law school to try to set ourselves up for afterward. It's not obviously it's not necessary to do that, but here's just a little plug for the power of like face-to-face networking. maybe an old school like boomer thing at this point, but some sort of face-to-face, because I set the job that I had so that I could take the bar and come back to that job. I set that up for a couple of years in law school, and I clerked for a lot of different people, but then at the end, and I would recommend people do this, is get shameless and bury that ego and ask the people that you've clerked for or that through networking or whatever, ask them for some sort of a job. And I saw a question in the Q&A saying something about, is it easier to get a job as like a paralegal or law clerk than an attorney? And I think the answer is yes. That's how you get your foot in the door, especially at a small firm, and then have them want to keep you after they see what you can do for them. But, so I set that up for a couple of years. On my first day back after taking the bar, because I took a good amount of time off to study for the bar and treated that like a job. And then I come back my first day back, I meet some guy in the parking lot, walking up to the same doors as I am. We kind of, introduce each other. Oh, his name's Jeff. Where are you headed? Oh, I'm headed up, here. I'm a new like post-bar law clerk. And I said, oh, I'm a post-bar law clerk too. I'd never met him before. Apparently, in this time period that I took off, it was his first day too that day. But in this time period that I took off to study for the bar, he hadn't taken off, at least from networking. He had met one of the partners of the law firm out at a networking event, and they had just talked up over a beer or a whiskey or something, and he had gotten himself a job clerking my same job, at a desk right next to me, as soon as he got done taking the bar, just because they liked the cut of his jib, right? And this guy he had just graduated law school in Kentucky. So he was a great guy, and we worked together there, side by side for a few months until we both got other jobs. But just goes to show you what it took me 2 years to set up with the conservative approach. This guy did it in a beer.
Closed mouth doesn't get fed, right? Closed mouth doesn't get fed. I mean, that's just the adage I think take away, Brian, is to pop in. My father's in part of that with me growing up a ton. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's a bit of action, right? People don't know what they don't know, right? And the mere fact that you would just speak and share can really go a long way. So awesome comment.
So I appreciate those tips and information, Brian, but there is a majority of our members who are young professional women who are entering this, either a profession for the first time or the legal profession for the first time. And so there's obviously some anxiety associated with that. Cali, as a young female professional, can you talk to that anxiety that you're facing in the job search, especially when it comes to family planning? Not that that is the way it should be in our profession, but unfortunately, when it comes to getting hired by more senior lawyers, that is obviously something you're going to have to contend with. Can you speak to a little bit about how you have addressed this in your personal job search? Any tips that you would provide for those in a similar situation?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is to address the elephant in the room, right? Is to kind of know going into this profession that while we are making great strides as a profession in the area, that there is that stigma of a good old boys club. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but I will say that ABA, all these lawyers that are sitting here today, the attorneys that I get to interact with on a daily basis are making great strides against that. But that is something that I had to face head on when I was at my firm, the first firm I was at. And I thought the way to solve that was like, I'll take golf lessons. I'll learn golf lessons. I will, when we have like our annual golf club, like team, I will make my stake. I won't at least embarrass myself. And I won't be the one driving the golf cart. Try as I might and take as many golf classes as I wanted to. Somehow mine ended up not on the list for people that were going to play today. And so it is something out there, and it is something to address. But I think this really goes down to what Aaron, what Jerome, what Brian are saying is know your values. Find that partner that you look up to. Find your line in the sand. Find your non-negotiables as a female, as an attorney, as a mother, as a daughter, as a wife, whatever those are, and find partners that relate that. If you look at a firm and you see that they don't have any parental leave policy, that may not be the firm for you. If you see that time and time again, partners are males and you know that there have been females that have put in the time, that may not be the place for you. And I know that sometimes you don't have that luxury. And I think that a lot of times we are put in the position, like Brian was saying, we have to put our nose down and grind and find a position that's going to give us that passion, that's going to give us that leeway, that's going to give us the comfortability that we want. And I don't think that's a bad thing to shy away from. I think that's something to address and work on as a society and as a culture, but it's something that's very real. And what I've seen great success is, I am not a parent, but I've seen great success in individuals in my family, my friends that are parents, are having those tough conversations in a way that both individuals feel that they are leaving empowered. So is that, let's say that you are at a small firm, or you're at a firm that doesn't have a parental leave policy, and it's not for lack, it's just for lack that it's a 2-person firm and they're starting up. Fine, have that conversation with them and bring them suggestions. This is what the firm down the street is doing. This is something that I've seen in the firm. Maybe you're interviewing for the first time and you're saying, I saw that at X, Y, and Z firm, this is their parental leave. Could you let me know what your parental leave is like? So there's a lot of ways to address it. And I think the comfortability of yourself is important. And also, you know, that going into an interview, right? If someone walks in and they say like, well, you're not planning to have any kids, you have a 2,000 minimum billable hour, you know, you're going to probably turn around and walk the other way. But you have to find those lines in the sand, and you have to really look within yourself, within your family, to figure out what those lines look like, because it's out there, it's real, and it sucks, but there are so many mentors. There are so many people who are so willing to guide you through things, who are either managing partners of their own firms, females who have been in this situation. So I just really stress finding a mentor through bar service, finding a mentor through maybe a firm that you were at previously, and helping them walk through those situations with you.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. A lot of people, when they're first starting their job search, they go online to Google tips, tricks, resume information, things like that. Aaron, to you, what is something that you learned through the career search process that you can't get it on Google, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that was really valuable that I did prior to any interview was taking a keen perusal of not only the firms' websites when I was looking at some firms, and also looking at the types of cases they took on and recently, but also did a lot of research on the backgrounds of their attorneys as well. So I shamelessly went on LinkedIn and not only looked at the people that were going to be interviewing me, but also tried to do my best to find, their less seasoned attorneys, so their junior associates, and seeing what their backgrounds were, what they did, and just seeing if, these are going to be the people I'm working with. And if there's not really a fit here, especially like Jerome said, you're going to be working 2,000 billable hours. I mean, that's more time than you're spending at home in bed. So that, at the office firm. So you got to really enjoy the people you're around and the culture that you are surrounding yourself with. And I know, that's not something you can find on your resume. It's not something you can necessarily find on their website. So it's really about doing the due diligence and getting to know the people that you would be working with is not something you would necessarily find on the firm's website. I mean, of course, you'll find your CV and their bios and stuff like that, but peruse on LinkedIn and figure out what they find important, because that's really what's curated by that individual, right? It's not something that the firm wrote up for their associate to make them look as impressive as possible. So I think that's a good tip. And then I know this is going to sound really silly. This is something I picked up a long time ago, in just a creative writing class in undergrad, is that read your stuff aloud. So if you're sending out a personal statement or you're sending out your resume, actually read it out loud and see how it sounds, because sometimes what you think you wrote on paper sounds wonderful, and then you read it back and you're like, that makes no damn sense. Or, or I could say it in a softer way, or I can say it in a more personal way. And, I think that's really important, that you give voice to what you're putting down in writing represents you and how you would talk to an individual. Because otherwise, one person's going to be reading your resume and then they're going to be talking to you and you're going to look like two different individuals. And I think it's really important that you're adding voice to how you want to present yourself on paper, just the way you present yourself if we were face to face or in a Zoom. And that's not necessarily something you tend to think about. And I know it sounds silly to actually read it out loud, so close the door, or do it when your family's not around, or do it in the basement or outside or to your dog. But read your stuff out loud. It really does make a difference in the development of your content, and certainly it'll start you to spark other ideas. And then also the other piece here, again, taken from the same professor in the career writing class, was when you're writing your personal statement or your career, your cover page, try not to edit while you're writing, just write. And so like the exercise that we did was we actually turned off the screen and just wrote. And that was the hardest thing for me ever, to not want to edit as I was writing. But you would be amazed on how much more genuine and personal your personal statement comes across when you get all the thoughts out and then edit after, and then read it out loud and edit again. So just I say this all to say, find your voice and make sure the voice matches the person in front of the person that will be interviewing you, and make sure that you're well aware of the background of the person interviewing you. So you feel like you can have a level of comfortability with that person, because it's not really the first time meeting them, because you've already done the research on the back end of that person.
So can I touch on something, Ray, that Aaron just said, which is, I learned this lesson the hard way. Get in contact with somebody who either works at the firm, if it's a law firm that we're talking about, or I guess any business, but for me, it was law firms. Get in touch with somebody who works there or used to work there. And somebody hopefully with some credibility, but usually you can suss it out if they were fired because of insubordination or whatever they were doing. But I learned that the hard way, in that when I got to a law firm and learned, after a few months, once I started talking to the people there, that if I had actually called anybody there or taken it upon myself to like catch somebody coming out the door and just had a brief conversation with them, they would have said that they hated it there. And that it was, something they were doing for a short time for X, Y, or Z reason, right? And so the next job that I got, I made sure, once I figured out, okay, are we expanding or am I replacing somebody? Oh, I'm replacing somebody. Okay. And then you can do your own research or whatever, understanding that, even if the person doesn't work there anymore, this may be part of the interview process, because anything you say to that person may get told back. And so you're not doing anything shady, but I would not ask for permission to talk to somebody that they put in front of you. I would find somebody like that. And I think I got a real deal picture from the guy who had left and gone on to do something new. And he said, oh yeah, it's a great firm. Here's some issues with this and that, but it's a wonderful firm. And I learned a lot there. And it was like, great. I feel like I actually got the realistic picture. I would never work for another company or law firm without talking to somebody who works there or had worked there, at least one person.
So
And I think, Ray, if I can jump in on that too, I think that that's a really important point, is to look for like red flags. Also, when you see a lot of people leaving firm all at once, or you see people who have turned over, I was no more surprised than anybody when I had someone reach out to me about my job that I was leaving and ask me straight up, like, how was it? And I can't tell you how great it was to be able to help the next generation of attorney be like, it's a great place, but here's what you're getting. It's great, but and that's something that I have never done in my past. And up until I received that LinkedIn message from a prior individual, would have never thought about doing. But props to her for recognizing a red flag, because a few of us had left at the same time, and for doing something like that to ensure that she's at a place that's great for her. So use that. I think that's a great lesson.
Yeah, so the third leg to this stool of cold calling and doing LinkedIn research on the firm or the partners you're interviewing with is in-person networking. And as a young professional, that could be extremely intimidating, especially when you may be in the same room as judges, professors, or other bar leaders. Cali, as a younger lawyer of the group, how did you personally overcome that intimidation?
Yeah, so I'm a big metrics person. And so I kind of approach networking with metrics in sense of, I am a very social person, but I have to force myself to be that way. And network kind of makes you be that way. And I would say, I'm going to look at X amount of bars and see if they're a good fit for me. I'm going to see if these firms have any individuals that I think I can make a true connection with, or go to these events, like X amount of events a month or time. And that works for me because it was just another checkbox on my list of tasks to do instead of making it this big working thing. So metrics are a really great, useful thing to use, but also similar to my other one, know and respect what works best for you. So while Brian's example was this guy was studying for the bar and also going to a bar and chatting up a law firm partner that then got him that clerk position, that's not the only way. And I know that like in this generation that we're in, it's really easy to find yourself with that FOMO of like, if I don't go to this bar event, or if I don't go to this, if I don't get a, this on-site campus interview, I'm never going to be able to network or find the way I want to. When the reality is you're just going to find the people who are most like you and are most able to give you a position and a platform to excel at. So if you're not a drinker and you go to a bar and you sit and chat next to a partner, that may not be the right choice for you, because he may then expect, or she may then expect you to continue to have these drinks and perpetuate this type of person you are not. So find the person you are as a networker. Is that a LinkedIn stalker? Is that hey, find a connection? If I was to see Ray and I would say, oh, Ray, I also see that you're in Texas. Let's find that connection. Or is that walking up to someone at a bar event and being like, I've seen you around. What's your story? Those are all great ways to network. And it kind of takes the anxiety off of it, because there's not one right way to network. As much as you want to watch LinkedIn learning classes and all these things about how you network, it's really about, in this day and age, authenticity is a currency. And I think the more authentic you are, the better response that you'll get. And so use that to your advantage. And if you're not a huge networker and you don't like attending conferences, find out what you do like. And find that niche.
So when all of you find a way to make that as your like Instagram caption, just make sure you give Cali the credit for it. Authenticity is a currency. The snaps were triggered immediately on that one, but that's incredibly true. And frankly, if you don't mind if I add, authenticity is not easy, right? It's difficult. And I think all of us, the hope is you lean more into your authenticity later in life. Maybe it's because just you give 0 Fs, if you will, later in life, and you have the ability to do so. That being said, though, encouragement is to do more of that earlier on. Try to be the person you are from the outset, understanding the challenges that are there, because it's very difficult to scale back later, or then to try to reveal your true self later. And it'll frankly give you a lot more peace along the way.
And authenticity, I think, really comes from having that mentor relationship as the network grows. So it's kind of funny to think about, but as your network grows, your one-on-one mentorships will also grow with that network. And Jerome, I know you've taught in law school, so I'm sure you've been approached as a possible mentor. What are some ways that people reach out to you requesting a mentorship, for a lack of better phrase, that really catches your eye, that makes you want to engage that young professional?
Candidly, my best, let's call it mentor-mentee relationships, are the ones that never get called that. Here's what I mean by that. All of us have been part of this, join this mentorship program, right? And sure, I'm gonna be the mentor and the mentee. I've been in one now, I'm not sure which one I am. Actually, it's never been made clear. It's one of the tips ones. And as a former mentor of mine through that, has become a great friend. I actually use his book, his text for a course, teaching the corporate counsel externship colloquium. And so then he asked me, he's like, would you please join? I said, great. He said, join as a mentor. I said, sure. And I got in and I was like, am I the mentee? I don't know, right? I mean, those structures are super inorganic. So the ones that are more organically developed are the ones that seem to catch my eye. I don't think to date I've ever turned anyone down that's ever formally asked me, like, will you be my mentor? I don't think I've ever said like, no, prove it to me, right? I don't move that way. I'm always, time permitting, happy to help anyone any way I can, right? Or at a minimum, be a dot connector or something that I try to keep at the forefront. So the way I think it catches your eye is be genuine. Cali just said it, authenticity, right? If you're authentic, don't just try to meet with people because you think they can give you a job, right? Genuinely, people that I have love to hear about your story. Brian mentioned entertainment law, right? I mean, I too have had a chance to practice entertainment law in my realm of being an actor and a comedian, something that's still at the forefront. The irony of that, I probably touch more entertainment law today than I ever have before. Who crazy concept, entertainment and weed, they go together. But that being said, you know, I have found it valuable when someone reaches out to me, as I've done as well. It's just like you vibe with somebody, right? Brian mentioned that the guy that got the job, the desk next to him, just probably just vibing with somebody, got to meet him, and they had their drink and just said, hey, man, you're pretty cool, right? So the more you live like in your truth and who you are, a couple of things are going to happen. Number one, when you live authentically, you're going to give other people around you license to do so. You enable them to be authentic as well. They kind of let their own walls down. And then when you also live authentically, you're going to do a better job of educating people, quote unquote, what do lawyers look like, right? Because naturally, as a guy like me who, Aaron shared this as well, from a post-grad standpoint, I'm the first lawyer in my family. I'm from Detroit in the West Side, 7 Mile. Nobody knew anything about the law. I didn't know what litigation meant until I got to law school. I thought it was a bad word, right? And so I was like, what does that mean, right? Even though I became one in the earliest phases of my career. So, don't hide your truth. Don't try to impersonate and be an imposter. I mean, we deal with enough imposter syndrome. So I think the more you do that, you're going to find your mentors, just like, frankly, you'll find your mentees, because it'll be very natural and you're just living authentically. Those people are going to bump into, and those are people that you're going to genuinely gel with. So those are the ones that I appreciate the most when folks approach me.
And I know for me personally, finding those we'll call them informal mentorships or relationships, as well as the more, happy hour type socials. I know for me, within the tort trial and insurance practice section, tips of the ABA, that's kind of where I found my networking home. The ABA has a number of different practice specific section, division, and forums, which can be super useful for connecting with folks within that particular practice area. So I'm glad you mentioned tips in that, Jerome. But lastly, we're in the last couple minutes of this webinar. I kind of want to do a very quick rapid fire round robin. We talked a lot about careers and guidance and all that, but what is missing from this conversation? And what would you leave these young professionals with, how to continue that conversation? We'll start with you, Cali.
What I think is missing is that we acknowledge that this is a really hard time that you're in. And it's okay for you to acknowledge that as well. And it's okay for you to feel that way. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be anxious, and use that to the best ability possible for your job search, for whatever job you're doing right now, for your family. It's really easy to slip into a, well, you don't understand mentality of your first generation like myself. It's really hard to slip into a, no one understands what I'm doing. I'm living in this silo. Find your tribe, find your place within the legal profession or outside of the legal profession that you can lean on, because everyone in this Zoom room and everyone on call understands what you're going through, and it doesn't lessen anything that you're going through, but it can help you understand where to go from there.
Brian, what are we missing?
Jerome just mentioned imposter syndrome. So, my take on that, and I think this has been important for me because I certainly felt it earlier in my career, is that lawyers, we're trained in law school and we're trained young in practice to basically have imposter syndrome because we're trained to rely on evidence, good evidence, right, for an opinion or a conclusion. And if you're just graduating law school and taking the bar, there's probably scant evidence that you're actually a good lawyer, right? So if you have imposter syndrome and you feel like, oh, I was the first lawyer in my family too, so I had it hard. Like, should I even be here? Do I deserve this? And is this whole thing just a big, 6-figure mistake that I made? If you have imposter syndrome, it probably is some of the best evidence that you have that you are a good lawyer. And I can only speak from my personal experience, but it goes away as you build your, it's probably never completely gone, but as you build your skills, as you build your ability and to have success in this industry, it goes away.
Jerome, what are we missing?
I'll be brief and leave you with my 3 A's and 3 P's I love to bring up. So they're in the acronym. The first one is, in any situation you encounter, all those that come up, in your life, your 3 A is going to matter first. Okay. It's going to be your awareness, your accountability, and your action. Awareness that there is an issue in the first place. Accountability, what role, if any, have you played in creating that? And what role can you play going forward? And that's where your action comes in, to be able to take action. That's everything that you encounter, whether it be personal or professional. And the 3 P's, you heard us say a few of these today. It's passion, power, and purpose. follow your passions. Okay. I mean, it sounds so cliche and so hackneyed, but trust us, we're trying to tell you because we wish we'd have done more of it. Right. And we love, again, living vicariously through you all when you have a chance to do that. Your power is simply that. I think knowledge is power. Power comes in a variety of ways, not just physical strength, but each of you have your own unique sort of modicum and area of power around you. Recognize that and use that. And finally, follow your purpose, right? Your purpose is a reason I think we're all here for. And you have a unique one that's to you. And so you have unique gifts and talents and abilities that have been instilled in you. So do your best to bring those to fruition, and life's gonna be better for it.
Aaron, what are we missing?
So I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up my role with the ABA-YLD as a student director of financial wellness and student advocacy. And so, we all know that 6 months post-graduation, you are going to be faced with a really difficult time of having to pay some of those, as Brian said, potentially the six-figure mistake. And certainly we don't want you to think it is a mistake, because it's a wonderful profession, and just the people you meet, bar associations or otherwise, are just fantastic connection points. But I think really when you are looking for your job, be realistic about where you're going to land financially and budget accordingly. One thing that you can do during your time off, and I know it doesn't sound fun, but really start to budget about what it needs to look like based upon whatever repayment program you take. And, also look at opportunities for jobs if you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where it's public service loan forgiveness eligible, how that impacts you 10 years down the road, as opposed to the career pathway that you'll take if you didn't have a job that was eligible for that. Because that's the route I took, and I evaluated both sides of the coin, because I had job offers in the private sector and also in the 501c3 sector. And so I think really evaluating out your options, and also making sure that you are financially planning for your first 2, 3, 4 years in practice. Jerome said it well. I mean, live passionately and do pick the job that aligns with your mission. The money will come. Your job right out the gate, don't get discouraged if you're not, big law and making a six-figure salary, because that's the minority of the profession right now. It's not the majority. I think we all come out with the perception that we're always going to be in that, big law, making a six-figure salary, but it's okay if you aren't, because the money does come, and don't get discouraged by it, because I see so many young lawyers get discouraged by that. As far as resources go, I would just encourage you all, if you haven't done so already, check out our financial wellness website, ambar.org/debt. Lots of great resources there on how to budget, wellness tips, and just a lot of wonderful resources that you can peruse in between now and when you receive your bar exam results.
Well, thank you, panelists, for joining us today. Cali, Brian, Jerome, Aaron, I really do appreciate your insights. For our attendees, as a thank you for attending this week's programming, we are offering a 40% discount on select books between now and August 31st through the American Bar Association, including How Successful Law Firms Really Work, The Best Lawyer You Can Be, A Guide to Physical, Mental, Emotional, and Spiritual Wellness, The Student Loan Handbook for Law Students and Attorneys, An Introduction to Law Firm Practice, Strategic Networking for Introverts, Extroverts, and Everyone in Between, and Flying Solo, 5th edition, a survival guide for solo and small firm lawyers. You can visit ambar.org/postbar to order those books. And again, thank you, panelists. I appreciate your time here today. And Tracy, we're all done.